This week, reporting mass transit to the smell test. And how many times have you driven down the road, you see nearly empty buses going down the street? It's one of those topics that sparks a fight. Many transit districts, they're bleeding red ink, yet they want to continue to keep expanding. And in many communities, one of the leaders in the country is Portland, Oregon. Light rail has been the vehicle of choice over the last couple of decades. Well, light rail costs billions of taxpayers' dollars, and like the buses, only a small portion of the population uses them. But everyone is on the hook for the cost. In these times of examining government spending, should we be subsidizing mass transit? Joining me is Marc Scribner, a land use and transportation policy analyst with the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and John Charles, the president of the Cascade Policy Institute in Portland, Oregon. Let's start with you, John, because this whole business about Portland, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and I remember Portland has always been kind of touted as the leader of mass transit when they put in those light rail systems and everything else. But are they making money? Are they losing money? Are they expanding? Give us an update on where this light rail system is.
Well, of course, they're losing vast amounts of money. The entire system does. But the bigger problem with light rail is the capital cost compared to buses. The line now being planned, a little 7.3-mile expansion to southeast Portland, is estimated to cost about $205 million per mile just to build. The most expensive transit line in the history of Oregon, just to serve what they hope will be about 4,200 new transit customers. It's complete financial insanity.
And they want to expand, even though they're not making money on it.
Well, as far as they're concerned, making money isn't the point. This is sort of a welfare program. But you could provide superior express bus service for a tiny fraction of the cost, maybe 1/600th of the cost. But as far in Portland, buses are considered boring. Light rail is considered cool and hip, even though it's more expensive, less flexible, slower, uncomfortable. For some reason, there's this sort of cult mentality that we have to keep building trains, even though the financial condition of TriMet is that they're heading towards bankruptcy.
Yeah, and Mark, I mean, one of the things that I find kind of ironic is that in the early 20th century, that's what they had. They had cable cars on rails, and they got in the way of people that were buying automobiles, and so they tore up the tracks and threw them all away. Now they're rebuilding them. Is light rail, like John said, some sort of hip, cool thing that is sweeping the nation?
I mean, it is. I mean, and that has nothing to do with whether or not these are viable or efficient uses of transportation dollars. And you mentioned the early 20th century streetcar lines. Those were largely done by private companies. Now, I would be happy to have a debate about whether or not the private sector should take a much larger role in transit, but that isn't what we're talking about here. We're talking about pouring more money into very expensive rail transit, and as we just heard, yes, it is far more expensive than service delivery that could be done by buses, even if you were to have a dedicated busway. So the issue with rail transit really comes down to it's people loving trains and the sight of trains, but that is not the same thing as sensible transportation policy.
All right, but back to you, John. I mean, so people love trains, hip, cool, and all the other things you described, but how many people in Portland, which is considered to be a real leader in this, what percentage of the population or the people that use mass transit or the people that drive on the roads, however you want to measure it, how many people actually use it?
Well, that's the point. People say they love trains, but only in the abstract. When it comes time to leaving in the morning, almost nobody actually uses the train. Light rail only gets 1/3 of all of TriMet's riders, and TriMet itself only accounts for about 12% of total trips in the morning. So it's a tiny, tiny fraction of total usage because, of course, the road system is ubiquitous, and rail only takes you from a few places to a few places. So it's not even possible in theory for very many people to use the train. If you really believe in transit, which I do, well, road-based, rubber-tired transit is the best, cheapest, most efficient way to serve that need.
All right, Mark, you look at the national scope of this problem. Am I subsidizing somebody's light rail ride or bus ride? And if I am, how much would it cost for somebody to take an unsubsidized ride? Have you looked into those numbers?
Well, I can tell you that, well, first, starting 25 years ago, since the federal government started taking a much more active role in transit expenditures, we've seen, in terms of total trips taken in urban areas, we've seen the share of transit decline by a third. So having more government money at the federal level thrown on this hasn't created the riders that they were hoping for. Where we are right now is we have 25% of these highway user-generated dollars now going to non-highway forms of transportation, and it's largely transit, but it's also other things like these livability programs, such as bike trails and expanded sidewalks and narrow streets.
All right, so when I'm at the gas pump, I'll think of the bike trails and the light rail and the buses and everything else. All right, Marc Scribner from the Competitive Enterprise Institute and John Charles of the Cascade Policy Institute in Portland. Thank you both very, very much. Appreciate it.